because the moral obligation of tolerance doesn't make any sense at all in a relativistic worldview. It certainly makes sense in my worldview, but that's because I think that there are things that are right and wrong. It's not just my opinion. I mean, if I'm intolerant, then I'm wrong, even if I happen to like it, even if I happen to approve of it, even if I don't believe in that view, I still am judged wrong because the rule of tolerance is an objective thing that applies to everyone in the same situation. And if it turns out that relativism is true, then we live in a world in which nothing is wrong, nothing is evil, nothing is worthy of praise or blame. There is no justice or injustice, in which there is no tolerance. And I promise you something, friends, a world that promotes relativism will produce that kind of world. And this is why we subtitled the book, Feet Firmly Planted in Midair. And I'm going to let you in here in just kind of my closing remarks before our Q&A. A little secret about this whole thing. I know some of you are thinking, well, who could really believe that kind of thing? Who could live that way? Here's my answer. Nobody can and nobody does. You almost never find a real relativist. Oh, people can talk this way, but they can't live this way. They know better. And so you can be talking to somebody, in the line at the bank or something, and you're trying to argue for some type of absolute morality, and they're promoting their relativism, and they're waxing eloquent about it, and then somebody cuts in front of them in line, right? And they say, hey, back of the line, you shouldn't do that. Now, they don't then add, and by the way, that's just my personal moral view. It has nothing to do with you, so please just ignore my comment. No, they think the person actually did something wrong, don't they? And so they'll wax eloquent about moral relativism, and then in the next breath complain about somebody cutting in line, talk about the injustice of the legal system, talk about the unfairness at work, talk about those arrogant, narrow-minded, bigoted fundamentalists who are cramming their truth down our throats, all of which are nonsense if it turns out that relativism is true. Now, I don't think they're nonsense, and I don't think you think they're nonsense either. And if that's the case, then relativism must be false. And it kind of, the fact that it's false kind of expresses itself in odd ways in our conversation, even from people who consider themselves dyed-in-the-wool relativists, who are the quickest to respond, don't judge me, or who are you to tell me what I should do, or don't push your morality on me. I had a conversation in the same chiropractor's office with a young man named Gil, and this whole conversation is in the book. And Gil was a real nice guy, easygoing, didn't hold to my view of the world at all, but he was willing to talk about it. And so in the process of me getting physical therapy, we talked about spiritual things. And at one point, and he's very easygoing and very tolerant type, right? Until it got to the point where in the conversation about moral issues, it became clear that I thought homosexuality was immoral. Oh, no, he didn't like that. Now, I wasn't, beating up on anybody. I was just making a point. And he didn't like that. He said, you Christians, a lot of you guys are nice people, and a lot of things to like about you, but before long you start getting judgmental. Now, Gil didn't realize it, but he just made a big mistake. And so I was going to try to help him to see his mistake, and by asking him a question. I said, okay, Gil, well, I don't understand why you're angry. What's wrong with what I did? And he goes, I'm overacting here a little bit to make the point. He said, you were judging, and it's not right to judge. Well, what is that? And I said, well, Gil, if it's not right to judge, then why are you judging me right now? Now, he had never, ever heard anything like that before. And he kind of drops back a few steps there, and he's rubbing his chin, trying to regroup a little bit. I said, what the heck was that? All right. And I can hear him kind of mumbling under his breath as he's trying to, no, that's not what, that's not, stop and start. And finally he says, all right, well, I guess I was judging you. You're right. I guess it's okay to judge. That's what he said. He didn't want to give up his judgment, He said, I guess it's okay to judge. And then he adds this caveat. He says, as long as you don't push your morality on other people, once you push your morality, you've crossed the line. You can judge, but don't push your morality. Now, he thought he'd improved his lot. He just went out of the frying pan into the fire. Because then I was ready with another question. What do you think my question was? Gil, is that your morality? What you've just expressed to me, that you shouldn't push your morality on other people. He said, yeah. He didn't see it coming. I said, then why are you pushing it on me right now? Oh, yeah, let's see. He says, he's rubbing his chin again. Finally, he makes a couple other false starts, and he can't get going, you know. And finally, he says, it's not fair. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I can't find a way to say it in which it sounds right. He thought I was playing a word trick on him, you know. I said, Gil, it doesn't sound right because it's not right. It's self-refuting. It's like you're saying there are no moral rules. Here's one. Okay? And sometimes I have these kind of conversations with people, and they'll get all frustrated, and they'll say, well, now you got me all confused, you know. I said, no, I think you were a little confused when you started. You just now figured that out, you know. This is characteristic of a lot of people who want to champion relativism and at the same time cannot avoid making moral judgments. This is kind of like passive-aggressive. You know what passive-aggressive is? When people say two different things at the same time. They say like, they say something loudly and they say the second thing quietly. And it's the quiet thing that's really true. So like a gal will say, yeah, you know, I got divorced last year, but I'm completely over it. I don't hold any grudges against that jerk. Okay, see, the passive-aggressive there. So which part is true? I don't hold any grudges or the jerk part? The jerk part is what she really believes. That's the way passive-aggressive works. Well, this is kind of a passive-aggressive. There are no moral rules, therefore you shouldn't judge me. Well, if there are no moral rules, then how can there be the moral rule that you shouldn't judge other people? There is no truth, therefore you ought to tolerate different views. Well, if there's no truth, then there's no moral truth that you ought to tolerate different points of view. It's a good reason to do whatever you want if there is no morality. So when people ask me, they say to me, don't push your morality on me, I say, why not? Now see that silence right there? That's what I get back. Because there's no way for them to answer that without at the same time doing what? Pushing their morality on me. You see, people believe in morality so deeply that it comes out even when they're trying to deny it. Now, if relativism is false, and I think it's a bankrupt view, and I've given you some reasons why I think that's the case, then that means some form of moral objectivism's got to be true. Maybe there's only one, and I'm not promoting any particular view right now. Maybe there's only one moral rule in the whole world, and that moral view is that you shouldn't torture that moral rule is you shouldn't torture babies for fun, or it's wrong to gay bash, or intolerance is wrong, or I mean, pick whatever your favorite thing is. If there is only one moral principle in the universe, we have just made an unbelievable discovery. In the process of reflecting on the nature of the world, we have discovered a moral rule, some moral obligation that applies to us as human beings that is not physical. I mean, you can ask yourself the question, what the heck is a moral rule? Well, one thing it isn't something you're going to bump into in the dark. It doesn't extend in space. It doesn't have physical qualities. You can't examine it by physics. It's something that science has no access to in principle. But it's something we know just the same to be so. Now, if it turns out that there's one non-physical reality that science can't speak to, but we can actually know, it might be that there's a whole bunch of other things that are non-physical, that are inaccessible to science, even in principle, but are still things we can be reasonably certain of. And that's the liberating idea I want to leave you with. If there is morality in the world, and it's appropriate under some circumstances to demand tolerance from people and to require that human beings not be mistreated, well, then we've got to ask ourselves, what gives force to this moral obligation? If the moral obligation is just an accident, well, I don't know why we should obey it, frankly. When we look at the nature of it, laws even in our own societies, moral obligations are things that pass between minds. You might have a moral obligation to me, but you don't have a moral obligation to a disembodied principle that's just floating around in the universe. And I want to suggest to you that the best explanation for the existence of moral rules that we're all aware of in some measure, and there might be some debate about the details, which is okay, But foundationally, there are some moral rules in place. The best explanation is not going to be relativism, which is denial of moral rules. It's not going to be that moral rules just happen by chance, but rather they didn't happen by chance. They happened by non-chance. In other words, they're functions of mind. Someone is behind the moral rules. Some moral ruler is responsible for the moral rules themselves. And that means when we break a moral rule, we're not just violating a principle, but we are offending the one who made the rule. Now, this may be a new concept to some of you, but I just want you to stay with me for a moment. Because if that's the case, and it certainly seems to be in the running to me, I could be wrong about this, but I've done a lot of thinking about it, and I don't think there's a better explanation. This fits with the way we understand how moral rules or how rules and obligations work across the board. There